Ferrari did not just find performance. They found the kind of hidden advantage that makes every rival team panic, because it was not sitting on the front wing, or the floor, or anything fans usually notice. It was inside the wheel. After Lewis Hamilton's first Ferrari win, after 686 days without victory, the paddock started asking one question. How did Ferrari suddenly protect its tires so well at one of the most brutal tire circuits of the season? Then the answer began to appear. A concealed rear rim design. Custom vents. Thermal control. A possible 15 degrees Celsius drop in rear tire temperature. And a rule that says rim features intended to influence heat transfer are not permitted. That is why this is dangerous. Because if Ferrari's trick is legal, everyone has to copy it. If it is illegal, the championship has already been touched by it. And if the governing body waits too long, this tiny hidden rim could become the most expensive arms race of the season. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Ferrari's hidden rim caused so much alarm, you have to start with something most fans never think about. A Formula 1 tire is not just rubber. It is a temperature problem. Every lap, every corner, every braking zone, the tire is being pushed into a tiny window where it either works perfectly or begins to fall apart. Too cold, and the car slides. Too hot, and the grip fades. Too much pressure, and the contact patch changes. Too little, and the tire becomes unstable. That is why Barcelona was the perfect place for this story to explode. The Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya is brutal on tires. It does not forgive weakness. It loads the car through long corners, builds heat in the rear tires, and exposes any team that cannot keep its temperatures under control. So when Ferrari arrived there after months of struggling with tire degradation, then suddenly looked transformed, the paddock immediately knew something had changed. Lewis Hamilton did not win that race by surviving the tires. He won because Ferrari appeared to control them. And that difference is everything. Because in modern Formula 1, raw speed is only half the battle. A car can be fast for one lap and still lose the race. The real weapon is being fast when the tires are tired, when the track is hot, when the stint is long, and when every rival is waiting for your performance to collapse. That is what made Ferrari's Barcelona performance so suspicious. It did not look like a small improvement. It looked like a weakness had been removed. And when a team suddenly removes its biggest weakness, rivals start searching for the hidden reason. At first, the obvious places would have been the wings, the floor, the side pods, or the suspension. Those are the parts people usually look at when a car takes a step forward. But this time, the answer seemed to be somewhere quieter. Inside the wheel. Reports pointed to new rear rims made with BBS Japan, designed to improve thermal management. That phrase sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Ferrari may have found a way to move heat away from the tire more effectively, helping the rear tires stay calmer for longer. And that is a serious advantage. Because the rear tires are not just carrying the car. They are dealing with acceleration, traction, cornering load, and heat from the brakes. If those tires overheat, the driver has to back off. If they stay stable, the driver can keep attacking. This is where Ferrari's idea becomes dangerous. The rim sits between the tire and the brake system. The brakes generate enormous heat. That heat can travel through the wheel and affect the tire. If Ferrari found a clever way to stop that heat from soaking into the tire, then the car would not just feel better for one corner. It could feel better for an entire stint. Think of it like holding a hot pan with a thick oven glove. The pan is still hot. The heat is still there. But the barrier changes what reaches your hand. Ferrari's alleged rim design may have worked in a similar way. The heat from the brakes did not disappear, but the way it moved toward the tire may have changed. That is why the shape mattered. Reports described custom vents, an outer ring, and a design that moved away from traditional spokes. Those details were not decoration. They were part of a cooling concept. Air could interact with the rim differently. Heat could be managed more carefully. The tire could be protected at the exact moment when rivals expected Ferrari to suffer. And the data behind this is what made the paddock nervous. Pirelli's own explanation showed that rear tire carcass temperatures could be significantly lower than before. The report mentioned a possible reduction of at least 15 degrees Celsius, equal to roughly 1.5 pounds per square inch in pressure effect. That is not a tiny difference. That can change how a tire lives. It can change how much the driver pushes. It can change how long the car stays competitive. It can change strategy, because a team that protects its tires better does not have to react the same way as everyone else. Suddenly, Ferrari's Barcelona pace made more sense. And that is exactly why rivals were worried. Because if this was only about one race, the story might have faded. But if Ferrari had discovered a repeatable way to control rear tire temperature through the rim, then the entire development race had shifted. The battleground was no longer just the floor, the wings, or the suspension. It was the wheel itself. And here is the part that turned suspicion into pressure. Ferrari did not list the new rims in its official notification of new car parts. According to the report, that was legally permitted under the current rules. But in Formula 1, legal does not always mean comfortable. Rival teams do not like surprises, especially when the surprise arrives with a sudden performance jump and a historic win. They had no advance warning. They had no easy way to study the rear design. They had no clear explanation from Ferrari. So the paddock was left with the most dangerous thing in Formula 1. A fast car, a hidden part, and an unanswered question. Was this just brilliant engineering, or had Ferrari walked into a gray area that the governing body now had to close? That question matters because the rules do not completely ignore this topic. The regulations say features intended to influence the heat transfer characteristics of the wheel rim are not permitted. In simple terms, teams are not supposed to turn the rim into a tire heating or cooling device. But Ferrari's possible defense is obvious. They can argue the rim is legal. They can argue the design fits within the permitted dimensions. They can argue any cooling effect is part of normal wheel behavior, not a forbidden feature. And that is where the fight begins. Because rivals can look at the same part and say, no, the intent is clear. If a design uses vents, shapes, and airflow to cool the tire, then what else is it supposed to be doing? This is why the controversy is not simple. It is not a clean case of legal or illegal from the outside. It is a battle over intent. And intent is one of the hardest things to prove in Formula 1. Every team builds parts that affect multiple things at once. A shape can improve airflow. That same airflow can affect temperature. A rim can be designed for strength, weight, cooling, or all three. The question becomes, where does clever design end, and forbidden thermal control begin? That is the line Ferrari may have found. And if they found it first, the rest of the grid has a problem. Because there are only three possible reactions: complain, copy, or fall behind. And the most revealing detail is that rivals were not only angry. They were preparing to respond. The report says Red Bull was already planning its own updated rim design as early as the Austrian Grand Prix. That tells you everything. If rivals believed Ferrari had built something obviously illegal, the first move would be a full attack. But if the first move is to copy it, then they know the situation is more complicated. They know Ferrari may have found a legal advantage. And legal advantages are the most painful kind, because nobody can simply take them away without a fight. That is why this hidden rim could become much bigger than Barcelona. It could become the next Formula 1 arms race. One team finds a way to control tire temperature better. Another team copies. A third team takes the idea further. Soon, the governing body has to decide whether the sport is spending too much money chasing cooling tricks inside the wheel. And that is exactly what the governing body is now watching. The report says the area is being monitored, with discussions about what is reasonable and what is not. Pirelli is involved in those discussions too, because tire behavior affects the entire sport. The governing body does not want rims to become tools for cooling or heating tires in extreme ways. But for now, there is no immediate ban. And that is what makes this moment so tense. Ferrari are sitting on a possible advantage. Rivals are studying it. The governing body is watching it. And the championship is close enough for every decision to feel dangerous. Because if Ferrari keep gaining from this, pressure will rise. If Mercedes or Red Bull copy it and close the gap, the development war begins. If the governing body steps in too late, rivals will say the damage has already been done. If it steps in too early, Ferrari will say innovation is being punished only because it worked. That is the trap. Ferrari's hidden rim is not just a part. It is a question the whole paddock now has to answer. How much cooling is clever, and how much cooling is too much? And this is where the story becomes more dangerous for Ferrari. Because once a hidden idea becomes public, it is no longer just an advantage. It becomes evidence. Not evidence of wrongdoing, because that has not been established. But evidence that Ferrari found something rivals did not fully understand, did not expect, and did not have time to prepare for. That alone is enough to change the mood of a paddock. Formula 1 teams can accept being beaten by speed. They can accept being beaten by strategy. They can even accept being beaten by a better upgrade, as long as they know what the upgrade is and where the advantage came from. What they hate is uncertainty. And Ferrari created uncertainty at the worst possible moment. Because the Barcelona performance did not arrive quietly. It arrived with Lewis Hamilton winning in Ferrari Red, with the championship gap shrinking, with Mercedes suddenly looking less untouchable, and with every rival team realizing that tire temperature might have become the next hidden battlefield. That is why the rim revelation spread so quickly. The rear-wheel design was not something Ferrari had advertised. It was not part of the usual public list of updates. It was not something rivals could study in advance, compare against old photographs, and understand before the race. It appeared after the result had already done the damage. That matters. Because in Formula One, timing is everything. If a team reveals a new part on a Friday, rivals can react during the weekend. They can ask questions. They can look closely. They can raise concerns before the race. They can decide whether the governing body should examine it immediately. But if the key detail only becomes clear after the race, the story changes. The win has already happened. The points have already been scored. The emotion has already been released. And then the rivals are left staring at the result, wondering whether they were beaten by a legal innovation, or by a gray area that should have been controlled before the lights went out. That is why this did not feel like a normal upgrade story. It felt like a discovery. And discoveries in Formula One are rarely calm. The reports described Ferrari using new rear rims from BBS Japan, with a shape designed around thermal management. The details were precise enough to make engineers pay attention. Custom vents. An outer ring. A design that helped air interact differently with the wheel. A concept that could reduce the heat reaching the rear tire. At the same time, the rules contain language that makes the whole situation uncomfortable. Features intended to influence the heat transfer characteristics of the wheel rim are not permitted. That sentence is the pressure point. Because Ferrari can argue that the rim is legal within the permitted design space. They can argue that every wheel design naturally affects heat in some way. They can argue that the shape is not a forbidden thermal device, but a legal rim geometry that happens to manage conditions efficiently. Rivals can answer with one brutal question. If the design is not intended to influence heat, then why does the whole concept appear to revolve around cooling? That is where the conflict lives. Not in whether the rim exists. Not in whether tire temperature matters. But in whether Ferrari crossed from clever design into forbidden purpose. And purpose is where Formula One gets messy. Because every team knows how to describe a controversial part in the safest possible language. Nothing is ever a loophole. It is an interpretation. Nothing is ever a trick. It is an optimization. Nothing is ever designed to break the spirit of the rules. It is designed to maximize performance within the regulations. That is the game. And Ferrari are not alone in playing it. Every championship team has done it. Every serious contender searches for the sentence in the rulebook that others read too casually. That is part of Formula One's identity. Innovation does not happen by waiting for permission to be obvious. But there is a limit. And this controversy is about who gets to define that limit. The governing body is now watching the area. That alone tells you the concern is real. If this were nothing, there would be no need for internal discussions. No need to involve Pirelli. No need to think about future guidelines. No need to worry about an unnecessary development war. But the governing body also has not stepped in immediately. That tells you the opposite. Ferrari's design has not been treated as clearly illegal. And that is exactly why rivals are trapped. They cannot simply point to a clean ban and demand Ferrari be punished. But they also cannot ignore a performance idea that may help control tire temperature by a huge amount. So they are forced into the most uncomfortable position in Formula One. They have to challenge the concept while preparing to copy it. That is the part that exposes the truth. If a rival team screams that something is illegal, but its own design office is already working on a similar solution, then the fight is not only about legality. It is about time. Who understood the opportunity first? Who can reproduce it fastest? Who can pressure the governing body before Ferrari builds a bigger advantage? Who can make the concept look dangerous enough to restrict, while still keeping enough space to develop their own version if it remains allowed? That is why Red Bull's reported response matters. The report says Red Bull was already preparing an updated rim design as early as Austria. That does not sound like a team expecting the idea to vanish overnight. That sounds like a team recognizing a new frontier and refusing to be left behind.